Okay, hi, I'm Lucas Corbacero, and today I'm going to be talking about two stories that I chose, and I'm going to be comparing and contrasting them. And so the stories I picked for my horror and mystery project are Nightmare at 20,000 Feet by Richard Matheson and The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Both these stories are sad and scary because the authors wrote them so well. Poe, as we will learn, was depressed for much of his life and drank way too much alcohol, especially as his wife was dying. Just like his character Montresor in the story, Poe spent much time drunk and sad about the way the world had treated him. If you doubt how much sadness Poe struggled with in his life, just realize that his probably most famous story, The Raven, was written after his wife Virginia died of the horrific disease called tuberculosis, and this is the story. The Cask of Amontillado was written in 1846 as his wife suffered from the disease. Matheson, on the other hand, did not suffer deep sadness like Poe, but he spent time as an infantry soldier in World War II. In fact, he was sent home because of injuries in the war, so he knew what terror was all about. One of the reasons these stories got to me is that Poe and Matheson wrote a story about someone chained in a dungeon. Obviously, the cask in Poe's story, Born of a Man and Woman, was Matheson's first story, and it was about a child who looked like a monster, and he was kept chained in his parents' cellar. Okay, so it's obvious that both these stories are scary, and they are both from the genre of horror and death. They share other traits that make them very effective at scaring the reader. Both authors use the darkness to make things way more frightening. Down in Montresor's wine vault, Poe makes a point to write about how dark and dreary the surroundings are. It's wet, dark, and the air is so heavy that even the candles barely stay lit. In Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, of course, it is dark outside the plane windows, and it is also raining. These conditions make the monsters on the wing seem even more dangerous because not only can it stand on the wing of a plane going 200 miles per hour, it can do it in the rain. Clearly, both stories play into the human distress of the dark, nasty weather and cold. And then the one contrast between these two stories is that the main character in Nightmare at 20,000 Feet is actually being helped by not only the flight attendants, but also by his loving wife. Of course, her efforts don't really help, but at least she tried. Poor Fortunato in the cask has no helper or anyone wishing for his well-being, just his killer chaining him to the wall, then piling the stones as he will never be found again. So, both Poe and Matheson were very well received by literary critics. Matheson's stories were and is so loved that it became an episode in the famous show of The Twilight Zone and has been remade several times. Poe's story was so moving that it can be argued that Matheson's first story, Born of Man and Woman, was loosely based on The Cask. The famous kids' classic Goonies also features an ugly guy called the Sloth who is chained to a chair in a dark, dingy basement. If you're into horror and dark psychology of humans, these two stories will never disappoint you. And thank you for watching.